This week we're learning Parsha Vayeira. It's a very famous Parsha, and I'm sure when I will start telling you the content of it, you will realize that you heard about it previously, somewhere else, maybe. So God reveals himself to Abraham 3 days after the circumcision, which God has told Abraham to conduct on himself and all his household. And at the age of 99, Abraham has done that. But Abraham stops God suddenly, when God came over to Abraham and said, I want to talk to you. And suddenly Abraham stops God and says, God, forgive me, but I can see 3 guests coming to him, in the desert. He was sitting in front of his tent in a very hot day, and the 3 guests appeared in the heat of the day. One of the 3, who are actually angels, disguised as men, because God felt that Abraham probably wants those guests anyway, because despite the pain for him to have a destruction, his major idea in life was to feed people, to entertain people, to bring them over to his household and to tell them about one God. So those 3 angels came over, and one of them announces that in exactly 1 year, Sarah, who was barren basically all her life, will give birth to a son. Then next part of the Parsha, the most famous debate takes place between man and God. Abraham, after he gave food to those strangers and they went on their way, Abraham turns to God and they start discussion, and Abraham pleads with God to spare the wicked city of Sodom. Because God said, I'm sick and tired of this Sodom, 5 cities of Sodom, which all are very wicked, very sinful, and I want to destroy all of them. Now, Abraham basically tried to change God's mind, but he failed miserably because they couldn't find even a single tzaddik or a single non-sinner amongst all of the people of Sodom. 2 of the 3 men or angels arrive in the doomed city where Abraham's nephew Lot actually lives. Lot extends his hospitality to them and protects them from evil intentions of Sodomite mob, which wanted to conduct homosexual rape on those 2 people whom they believed were, the males which they desired them. The whole city of the males, homosexuals, turned up. The 2 guests reveal that they have come over to destroy the city of Sodom, the whole place. They revealed to Lot. And at the same time, they were told to save Lot and his family. Lot's wife, on the way out, they've been told that they should not look back when they run away. And Lot's wife turns into a pillar of salt when she disobeys this command not to look back. And at the burning city as they flee. While taking shelter in a cave, Lot's 2 daughters believe that they are the only people left on the planet. It's Armageddon. For them, the whole place consisted of those 5 cities of Sodom, and they all were destroyed. So they believe that their duty now is to get their father drunk and to have an intercourse with their father and to continue repopulate the planet. So the 2 sons born from this incident of father having an intercourse with his daughters, were the progenitors of the nations of Moab and Ammon. Abraham moves to city of Gerar, where the Philistine king Abimelech takes Sarah, who is been presented as Abraham's sister, otherwise they would kill Abraham because of her beauty, and he takes her to his palace, to his harem. Exactly the same story as it was with the Pharaoh. So in a dream, God warns Avimelech that he will die unless he lets Sarah go to her husband. And Abraham explains that he feared for his life, so in order not to be killed, he told that Sarah is his sister. God remembers his promise to Sarah and gives her and Abraham a son who is named Yitzchak, as we know, meaning will love. Isaac is circumcised at the age of 8 days, and Abraham is 100 years old at the time, and Sarah is 90 at their child's birth. Well, it is a miracle from every point of view. Hagar and Ishmael are banished from Abraham's home and wander into the desert because Ishmael behaves very badly and becomes a real menace to young little Isaac. God hears the cry of a dying lad, Ishmael we're talking about, and saves his life by showing his mother a well. Avimelech makes a treaty with Abraham at Beersheba, which is a peace treaty. So then time passes by, and God tests Abraham's devotion by commanding him to sacrifice Isaac on Mount Moriah. Today it's the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Isaac is bound and placed on the altar, and Abraham raises the knife to slaughter his son, his one and only son with Sarah, whom he desired very badly all his life. So a voice comes from heaven and tells him to stop immediately. And he can see a ram caught in the undergrowth by its horns, and this ram is offered instead of Isaac as a sacrifice. Abraham receives the news of birth of daughter Rebecca to his nephew Bethuel. Rebecca? Yes, the future wife of Isaac. And that is the whole content of this parsha. Obviously, one of the most dramatic places in the whole Torah, I think even in the whole Tanakh, is the binding of Isaac and the situation where God has told Abraham to sacrifice his son. And it raises many questions. Let's look a little bit in depth on that. Why does God ask Abraham to sacrifice Isaac? What does this test teach him or us, as a matter of fact? Traditionally, we learn that this was a test of Abraham's love for God and that he loved God more than he loved his own son. Well, let's look a little bit deeper. But the whole concept is truly paradoxical. The Torah believes that the child sacrifice is one of the worst evils. It's stated many times. And had the point of this trial been Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son, then Abraham would have been proven that he was no better than the idolaters of this time who were often sacrificing their children to gods. It was a very common practice in other tribes, in non-Jewish tribes, obviously. Right? So, in fact, Abraham's very essence of his name even was an essence of a model father. The name Abram means mighty father. And when God changed his name from Abram to Abraham, that signifies father of many nations, which he is. From him sprang Judaism, Islam, all the Islamic nations, and all the Christian nations. Abraham was chosen to be a role model of fatherhood. A model father does not sacrifice his child. It's absolutely, the whole situation is totally paradoxical. The classic interpretation that Abraham loved God more than he loved his own son, well, while powerfully, the whole concept of Torah contradicts all of this. This trial tested Abraham's faith to the limit but what was the true nature of the test. Perhaps the true test was facing the contradiction between God's promises and reality. Because God promised Abraham that through Isaac he would have many descendants who would become a great nation. And then God demanded him sacrifice this very Isaac, his own one and only son, with Sarah in his youth. That doesn't gel. It's a total contradiction. The trial was therefore not to see whether Abraham had the courage to sacrifice his son. No. The trial was to see whether Abraham could live with what seemed to be a clear contradiction between God's word now and God's previous promises. Could Abraham live with uncertainty and maintain his faith in that kind of environment? That was the test. Could Abraham live with it? For how long and how he would handle it? That's what Hashem wanted to check out. He did just that. Abraham prepared himself for the sacrifice, but he told no one else. And when he and Isaac set off on the third day of their own, he told the servants that who accompanied them to stay with the donkeys down below, while he and the boy will go over to the top of the mountain there. They will worship and they will come back. When Isaac asked, "Where is the lamb for the sacrifice, for the burnt offering?" Abraham replied, "God himself will provide the lamb." Well, these statements are usually taken as a diplomatic evasion by the classic interpretations. However, Rabbi Sachs believes that Abraham meant exactly what he said. He was living with the contradiction. He knew God had told him to sacrifice his son, but he also knew that God had told him that he will establish a new everlasting covenant with his son and will establish a new very important nation. The trial of the binding of Isaac was not about sacrifice but about uncertainty. Until it was over, Abraham did not know what to believe or how it would end. A pattern is beginning to emerge. Abraham was learning that there is a long and winding road between promise and fulfillment. Not because God does not keep his word, but because Abraham and his descendants were charged with bringing something new into this world. A secret society, a nation formed by covenant, an abandonment of idolatry, and an austere code of conduct based on responsibilities, a code of conduct, a more intimate relationship with God than any people has ever known. Yes, we Jews are the pioneers of a relationship between the physical world and spiritual world. And God was teaching Abraham from the very beginning that this demands extraordinary strength of character, because nothing great and transformative happens overnight in the human world. You have to keep going even if you are tired, lost, exhausted, and probably despondent, and even to some degree disappointed. God will bring about everything he promised, but not immediately and not directly. God seeks change in the real world of everyday lives, and he seeks those who have the tenacity of faith to keep going despite all the setbacks. That is what the life of Abraham is all about. That is what our life is all about even today as well. We as a civilization are learning to live with uncertainty of COVID-19 right now, with lockdowns, with suffering economies, with loss of lives, with loss of businesses and jobs, with significantly reduced expectations of pleasure and entertainment. What is incredible is that all governments reacted to the pandemic in a similar way, more or less, based on specific medical advices of their own countries. But what is different is the maturity of the people in individual countries or continents. I want to make a very serious statement here. I will take my hat off to Australian people and to people of New Zealand. We in Australia and New Zealand, as a community, have been much more mature than the population of all of Europe and United Kingdom. Over there, they demonstrate demanding rights not to wear masks, which is a right to infect other people in the middle of the crisis. In USA, it's even worse. On top of all that, they were asking for anarchy. They want to eliminate police, and instead of law and order, they want to have free fall. They actually partially removed police from some suburbs in some cities. One of them is Chicago. Again, all demanding rights for their perceived freedoms. And that is in the middle of a major crisis, pandemic of biblical proportions. I have news for you all people who demanding those so-called rights. COVID-19 will stay on this planet till people will understand that rights come after responsibilities. That the seventh Noahide law, which was given to Noah by God, is saying that people must establish legal system of courts and law enforcement, meaning police. And it must be followed, and we will learn to love our friends as ourselves, as part of the same process. And only when people will understand that responsibilities are much more important than their so-called democratic rights, only then hopefully we will be mature enough and the spiritual world will be happy enough for this to remove COVID-19. Shabbat Shalom.
למען החי ורעי, למען החי ורעי, אדם בנה שלום לך, למען החי למען החי ורעי, אדברה שלום בך.